The idea of finding a human ancestor frozen in ice is a powerful one. It sounds like something from a movie, doesn't it? You can picture it clearly. A team of scientists, maybe in a remote, windswept part of Siberia or the high Alps. They dig down deep into the ancient ice, and there it is, a body. Not just bones, the usual finds, but actual skin and hair, maybe even muscles and internal organs. Perhaps some ancient clothing, a few tools, all preserved, a face looking out from the distant past suddenly revealed to us. It's an amazing, almost magical thought, but how real is it? Can we truly hope to find something like that? And if we did, what would such an incredible discovery even mean for our understanding of who we are? Let's first get clear on what we mean by ancestor in this context. When we talk about human ancestors, we're not just thinking about a person from a few thousand years ago. We are talking about creatures that lived long before modern humans, Homo sapiens. We are referring to hominins. This broad group includes our direct lineage, our close extinct relatives, and all the species that emerged after our evolutionary line split from the chimpanzee line millions of years ago. This journey through time goes back several million years, not just thousands. Our evolutionary story, as far as we know it, largely begins in Africa. The earliest hominins emerged there. Think of species like Ardipithecus ramidus, which lived around 4.4 million years ago. Then come the Australopithecines, like the famous Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis, who walked the earth about 3.2 million years ago. These were creatures that walked upright, at least partly. They had brains that were relatively small, more similar in size to chimpanzees than to modern humans. They lived in warm, often wooded or savanna environments in East Africa. These regions were never known for vast, long-lasting ice sheets. Later, the genus Homo came onto the scene. Homo habilis, appearing around 2.4 million years ago, is often considered one of the first species to consistently make and use stone tools. Then came Homo erectus, around 1.8 million years ago. Homo erectus was a significant evolutionary step. They walked fully upright, had larger brains than earlier hominins, and developed more sophisticated stone tools. Crucially, Homo erectus was the first hominin species to leave Africa, spreading across Asia and into Europe. These were resilient, adaptable beings capable of surviving in diverse climates. Much more recently in the grand scheme of things, you find the Neanderthals and Denisovans. These hominins are much, much closer to us in evolutionary terms. Neanderthals lived across Europe and parts of Western Asia roughly from 400,000 years ago until about 40,000 years ago. The Denisovans inhabited parts of Asia, and we still know relatively little about them compared to Neanderthals. Both of these groups lived during periods when the Earth's climate was significantly colder, experiencing multiple ice ages. They were adept at surviving in harsh, sometimes frozen, landscapes. So when we consider the possibility of finding an ancestor frozen in ice, it's vital to ask which ancestor are we talking about? An Australopithecine from millions of years ago? A Homo erectus that migrated out of Africa? Or a Neanderthal or a Denisovan from more recent ice ages? The answer to this question profoundly affects the likelihood of such a discovery. For a body to be preserved not just as mineralized bones fossils, but with soft tissues, skin, hair, muscles, organs, it requires extremely specific and rare conditions. The fundamental goal of preservation is to halt the process of decay. Decay is driven by bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms that break down organic matter. Oxygen is often a key ingredient for these decomposers to thrive. Therefore, to stop decay, you generally need to remove oxygen or create an environment where these organisms cannot function. Extreme cold is one of the most effective ways to do this. It dramatically slows down or completely stops the metabolic activity of decomposers. Dryness also helps, as does the presence of certain natural chemicals in the soil or water. The ice is, in essence, a perfect natural freezer. When a body is quickly enveloped by ice, it is effectively locked away from oxygen and kept at temperatures far below freezing. This combination can keep a body almost intact for an astonishingly long time, even preserving delicate structures. We have compelling evidence that this type of preservation is possible, primarily from animal discoveries. Think of the woolly mammoths. Scientists have found incredibly well-preserved mammoth remains in the permafrost of Siberia and Alaska. Some of these finds still retain skin, hair, muscles, internal organs, and even blood. One particularly famous discovery is Lyuba, a baby mammoth found in 2007, almost perfectly preserved. She lived about 42,000 years ago. Her eyes were still intact, her trunk perfectly formed, and scientists could even analyze her last meal in her stomach. Such finds demonstrate the remarkable preserving power of ice and permafrost, capable of keeping a large mammal looking astonishingly lifelike for tens of thousands of years. The woolly rhinos have also been found preserved in similar conditions. And crucially, we have found a human, or at least a very ancient Homo sapiens, preserved in ice. This is Ötzi the Iceman. He was discovered in the Ötztal Alps on the border between Austria and Italy in 1991. Ötzi was not an early hominin ancestor in the deep evolutionary sense. He was a modern human, a Homo sapiens. However, he lived approximately 5,300 years ago. That is a significant span of time. His body was remarkably well preserved. He had his full range of clothing made from various animal skins, his tools, a copper axe, and even complex tattoos on his skin. And researchers have studied his last meal, his overall health, and the precise manner of his death, and he was shot in the back with an arrow. Ötzi serves as irrefutable proof that ice can preserve a human body, along with all its associated artifacts, for many thousands of years. But here's the critical distinction. 5,300 years, while a long time, is vastly different from millions of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years. And that difference in timescale is where the challenge of finding an older ancestor in ice becomes almost insurmountable. Let's consider the earliest hominins, those like Ardipithecus or the various Australopithecus. They lived between 2 and 6 million years ago. Their known habitat was primarily Africa, specifically in regions like the Great Rift Valley in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tanzania, or the cave systems of South Africa. These regions have been largely warm, tropical, or subtropical for millions of years. They simply do not possess the vast, stable, and ancient ice sheets, or extensive permafrost required for long-term frozen preservation. Therefore, the chances of finding an early hominin frozen in ice in Africa are, for all practical purposes, zero. The environmental conditions were never right. These early ancestors are discovered as fossils. Their bones undergo a process of mineralization, where organic material is slowly replaced by minerals from surrounding sediment over millions of years. This process turns bones into stone. It preserves the shape and structure of the bones, which tells us about their locomotion, size, and muscle attachments. But fossilization does not preserve soft tissue, hair, skin, or DNA. It's a different form of preservation altogether. Now let's consider Homo erectus. This species lived for a very long time, from about 1.8 million years ago to as recently as 100,000 years ago in some places. They were the first hominins to venture out of Africa, spreading across Asia and into Europe. While these regions experienced colder periods, especially in the later stages of Homo erectus' existence, the earliest and most widespread populations lived before the most intense and sustained periods of glacial activity that created our modern ice sheets. And even if a Homo erectus individual somehow became trapped in ice, the stability of that ice over such immense timescales is the main hurdle. And glaciers are not static entities. They flow, move, advance, and retreat. Over millions of years, a body trapped within a glacier would almost certainly be subjected to immense pressure, grinding forces, and eventual melting and refreezing cycles, which would destroy any soft tissues. Imagine a colossal, slow-moving conveyor belt and crusher. So, for an ancestor from millions of years ago, or even a million years ago, the odds are virtually impossible. The climate wasn't right in their primary habitats. The kind of stable, long-lasting ice needed was not present where and when they lived. And even if it were, the sheer geological dynamism and forces over that much time would almost certainly obliterate anything as fragile as preserved soft tissue. What about Neanderthals and Denisovans? These groups lived much more recently, primarily within the last 400,000 years. They specifically inhabited colder climates in Europe and Asia. Neanderthals are well known from sites across Europe and parts of Western Asia. Denisovans are primarily known from a cave in Siberia. These are precisely the regions where permafrost exists today, and where vast ice sheets have existed for extended periods during multiple glacial cycles. Permafrost is ground that remains frozen for at least 2 consecutive years in many areas. It has been continuously frozen for tens or even hundreds of thousands of years. This is where the idea of a frozen ancestor becomes slightly less fantastical. We have clear evidence that permafrost can preserve large animals like mammoths for tens of thousands of years. So, could it preserve a Neanderthal or a Denisovan? It's still an extreme long shot, an almost unbelievably rare event. But it's no longer entirely out of the question as it is for earlier hominins. Imagine a Neanderthal hunter caught in a sudden, intense snowstorm or falling into a deep crevasse in a glacier. if their body was rapidly covered by snow and ice, and then that ice subsequently became part of a stable, long-lasting permafrost layer or a very deep, stable part of a glacier, then theoretically, yes, preservation could occur. But even for Neanderthals and Denisovans, there are immense challenges. One major challenge is simply the duration of preservation. Neanderthals disappeared around 40,000 years ago, though some fossil evidence goes back to 400,000 years. We are talking about finding a body that is between 40,000 and 400,000 years old. While mammoths provide examples of preservation at 40,000 years, older finds of soft tissue are much rarer and typically less complete. The older the remains, the more time there has been for degradation to occur, even in frozen conditions. Even in ice, tiny ice crystals can form and reform over millennia, causing cellular damage. Small fluctuations in temperature over long periods, perhaps due to changes in overlying snow cover or groundwater, can also lead to slow but continuous degradation. DNA, while remarkably stable, eventually breaks down over hundreds of thousands of years, becoming fragmented and difficult to recover. Another formidable challenge is discovery. Where would one even begin to look? Vast expanses of Siberia, northern Europe, or high mountain ranges in Asia are incredibly remote and difficult to access. These areas are enormous, making the search akin to looking for a needle in a continent-sized haystack. And how would researchers pinpoint where to dig for such a rare find? Most significant discoveries of ancient remains, whether frozen or fossilized, occur by chance. They are exposed by thawing riverbanks, coastal erosion, construction work, mining operations, or other natural geological processes. A targeted search for a Neanderthal in deep permafrost would be an undertaking of unimaginable scale and cost, with an incredibly low probability of success. The nature of ice itself poses problems. Glaciers, as mentioned, are dynamic. They are not static time capsules. Most ice that has persisted for hundreds of thousands of years is deep within glaciers that are constantly flowing, deforming, and melting at their edges. A body caught in such a dynamic system would likely be subjected to immense pressure, shearing forces, and eventual transport to a warmer region where it would eventually thaw and decompose. Permafrost is generally more stable than glacial ice, but even permafrost can undergo cycles of thawing and refreezing over geological timescales, and global climate change is currently causing widespread permafrost thaw, which is paradoxically exposing many ancient remains. What would we gain from such an incredible discovery? The scientific value would be monumental, transformative, and truly beyond measure. If we found a well-preserved Neanderthal or Denisovan body, it would trigger a revolution in our understanding of these close human relatives. First, we would finally see what they actually looked like. Our current understanding of their appearance comes from skulls and bones, allowing us to reconstruct their general build, robust features, and brain size. But skin color, hair color, eye color, the precise shape of their nose, ears, and other soft facial features? These are all things we can only infer or guess at from skeletal remains. A frozen body would provide direct, unambiguous answers, giving us a true, tangible face from the distant past. It would allow for incredibly accurate reconstruction. Second, the preservation of soft tissues, muscles, internal organs, blood vessels, brain tissue. This would open up entirely new avenues of biological study. We could investigate their physiology in exquisite detail. What specific diseases did they suffer from? Not just those leaving marks on bones, but also those affecting soft organs. What was their exact diet, not just inferred from tooth wear or chemical signatures in bones, but from analyzing the contents of their stomach or intestines? We could learn about their immune system, their metabolism, and potentially genetic predispositions to certain conditions. Third, DNA. This is perhaps the most significant potential gain. While we have successfully extracted DNA from Neanderthal and Denisovan bones, and this has already provided incredible insights into their genetics, their evolutionary relationship to us, and their migration patterns, DNA from soft tissue would be of much higher quality. It would likely be more complete, less fragmented, and less degraded. Such high-quality DNA could unlock even more profound secrets about their biology, their adaptations to cold climates, their sensory perceptions, and even complex traits that are difficult to infer from skeletal remains. We might even find ancient viruses or bacteria within their tissues, shedding light on the historical ecology of diseases. Fourth, their culture and technology. If the individual died with their belongings, we could recover actual clothing. What materials did they use? How were garments constructed and tailored? What types of tools did they carry? What ornaments or personal items? Ötzi the Iceman showed us how much invaluable cultural and technological information can be preserved directly with a body. A Neanderthal or Denisovan found with their full kit would be an unparalleled archaeological and anthropological treasure trove. It would offer a direct, unfiltered snapshot of their daily life, their craftsmanship, their resourcefulness, and their ingenious adaptations to their environment. Fifth, their immediate environment and circumstances of death. Pollen grains and other microscopic plant remains found with the body could provide detailed information about the local flora and climate at the exact time of death. The condition of the body itself could offer clues about the immediate environmental conditions. Evidence of injuries, whether from hunting accidents, interpersonal conflict, or other traumas, would be far more detailed than what bones alone can tell us. Imagine being able to examine their health in detail. Did they suffer from chronic conditions like arthritis, as suggested by some bone evidence? And if so, how severe was it? Were they generally well nourished, or did they face periods of starvation? Did they have broken bones that healed poorly, or evidence of sophisticated medical knowledge in their treatments? All these questions, usually answered partially by studying bone pathologies, could be addressed directly and comprehensively. We might even get clues about brain structure, although the delicate nature of brain tissue means it is highly unlikely to be perfectly preserved or functional. The idea of cloning, often raised in science fiction scenarios involving preserved ancient life, is a far more complex and currently unachievable prospect. Preserved DNA would be an astonishing resource. Recreating a living being from ancient, degraded DNA is a monumental scientific and ethical challenge. It is not merely about having the DNA sequence, it involves having intact, viable cells, or at least chromosomes, and a functional method to bring them back to life in a living organism. For now, such a feat remains firmly in the realm of fiction. The immediate and tangible scientific value would lie in understanding their biology, not in attempting to resurrect them. Let's step back and consider the overall likelihood again, summarizing the points clearly. For the earliest hominins, those from 2 to 6 million years ago, primarily in Africa, the chance of finding a preserved body in ice is practically non-existent. Their habitats were warm, and the geological timescale involved makes continuous, stable ice preservation impossible. For Homo erectus, whose existence spans up to 1.8 million years ago, it remains incredibly improbable. While they moved into cooler regions, the age is still far too great for the kind of stable ice preservation required. Any ice from that long ago would have undergone too many cycles of melting, freezing, and glacial movement to maintain delicate, soft tissues. For Neanderthals and Denisovans, who lived more recently within the last 400,000 years, and in colder climates, the odds, while still overwhelmingly against it, are not absolute zero. These groups lived within the time frame of known stable permafrost existence. Areas in Siberia, for example, have permafrost layers that have been continuously frozen for hundreds of thousands of years. It is in such environments that our vanishingly small chances might lie. Consider the remarkable example of ancient microscopic life. Scientists have successfully revived roundworms nematodes that were frozen in Siberian permafrost for 46,000 years. This demonstrates the incredible preserving power of deep permafrost for simpler, resilient organisms. While a complex human body presents far greater challenges, it does illustrate the potential depth and stability of some permafrost zones. This prevents scavenging by animals and rapid decomposition by microorganisms. This means no significant thawing cycles, no substantial temperature fluctuations that could cause degradation through freeze-thaw damage. This typically happens as glaciers retreat, permafrost thaws, or through human activities like construction or mining. Each one of these conditions, taken individually, is extremely unlikely. When you combine and multiply these low probabilities, the chance of such a discovery becomes infinitesimally small. However, the Earth is an immense planet. The sheer volume of undiscovered ground, especially in remote, perpetually frozen regions, is vast. We are only just beginning to explore and understand what lies hidden beneath these frozen landscapes. And as the global climate continues to change, leading to the thawing of permafrost, in many areas, more ancient remains are indeed being exposed. While most of these finds are typically well-known Ice Age megafauna, the possibility of a hominin, however remote, continues to fuel scientific imagination and exploration. So, to state it directly, finding an early human ancestor like Lucy or Australopithecus in ice is not going to happen. It is geographically, climatically, and chronologically impossible given what we know about their environments and the stability of ice. Finding a Homo erectus in ice is also incredibly unlikely, almost certainly impossible, due to the immense age and the dynamic nature of ice over such long periods. Finding a Neanderthal or Denisovan in ice is still extremely, incredibly, overwhelmingly improbable. But it is not 100% impossible. It remains within the very outer limits of what is conceivable, representing one of the greatest potential scientific discoveries imaginable if it ever occurred. We should also consider the ethical dimension. If such a perfectly preserved body of an ancient human relative were found, what would be the appropriate course of action? These are, after all, ancient human remains, and they demand respect. Scientists would need to carefully balance the immense scientific imperative to study and learn from such a find with the ethical imperative to treat the remains with dignity. Questions would immediately arise. Who has ownership of the body? Which country or indigenous group, if any, holds rights to it? Who decides what happens to it? Should it be preserved purely for scientific study or put on public display? These are complex questions that arise with any significant ancient human find, and they would be magnified exponentially for a perfectly preserved specimen. The ultimate goal would be to gain as much knowledge as possible for the benefit of all humanity, while also honoring the individual from the deep past. The ongoing work in paleontology and archaeology, even with its limitations, has already revealed an incredible amount about our past. We've learned about the diets of our ancestors, their common diseases, their injuries from daily life or conflict, and their strategies for survival. We've traced migration paths, understood the complex interbreeding between different hominin groups like modern humans and Neanderthals, and identified many of the genetic changes that led to the evolution of modern humans. All of this knowledge comes from fragments, from teeth, partial skeletons, and carefully excavated tools. Imagine the depth of information a complete soft tissue body could provide. For now, the core work of understanding human evolution continues to rely on the painstaking excavation of fossil sites. We continue to piece together our vast family tree from mineralized bone fragments, ancient stone tools, and the precious DNA extracted from those bones. Each new fossil discovery, no matter how small or fragmented, adds another crucial piece to our ever-growing understanding of human evolution. The discovery of a single toe bone or finger bone from Denisovan cave, for example, yielded enough ancient DNA to identify an entirely new, previously unknown branch of humanity. That was a truly game-changing discovery, and it came from a tiny bone fragment, not a full body. The dream of a frozen ancestor in ice will likely remain largely a dream for most chapters of our evolutionary story. But it's a powerful dream because it speaks to a profound human desire, our longing to connect with our past, to literally see the faces of those who came before us. It's a desire to understand ourselves more completely by understanding firsthand where we truly came from. And while the ice may not hold the answers for the earliest chapters of our story, or even for most of it, the lingering possibility for later hominins reminds us of the incredible forces of nature that shape our world, and sometimes preserve its most precious and astonishing secrets. So, while we might not stumble upon a pristine million-year-old Australopithecus frozen solid, the incredible stories of Ötzi the Iceman and the Siberian mammoths do keep a tiny, distant sliver of hope alive for discovering later human relatives. It reminds us that sometimes, against almost unimaginable odds, the past can indeed reach out and touch the present in the most astonishing and unexpected ways. The scientific community will continue to explore, to search, particularly in thawing permafrost zones and retreating glacial areas, knowing that any discovery, even a small bone or tool, can fundamentally reshape our understanding of what it means to be human. But a fully fleshed ancestor from the deep, deep past? That would be a story for the absolute ages if it ever happens. And that if is truly a mighty one. The sheer scale of geological time involved is almost impossible for our minds to fully grasp. Imagine 1 million years. Now, multiply that by 2, 3, 4, or even 6. That is how far back some of our earliest ancestors walked the Earth. During those millions of years, continents have drifted across the globe. Vast mountain ranges have risen and been eroded away. Climates have swung wildly, from warm periods to extreme ice ages many times over. What might have been an icy region for a temporary period could have later melted, becoming a lush forest, then a vast desert, then perhaps submerged beneath an ancient sea, only to re-emerge and change again. This constant, relentless geological churn and transformation of the Earth's surface works directly against the delicate, long-term preservation of soft tissue. It is like trying to keep a fragile glass sculpture perfectly intact through countless earthquakes, floods, and volcanic eruptions. And let's not overlook the numbers game. How many individual hominins were alive on Earth at any given time, millions of years ago? Probably not enormous populations compared to modern humans, and out of those relatively small populations, how many died in precisely the right conditions to be instantly buried and frozen before decay set in? That would be an incredibly tiny fraction of an already small number. And out of those extremely rare individuals, how many remain perfectly preserved, continuously frozen and undisturbed for hundreds of thousands or even millions of years? An even tinier fraction. And out of those infinitesimally few, how many would we, with our current technologies and limited reach, actually discover in the vastness of the Earth? The odds truly stack up against us in an overwhelming and almost insurmountable way. It is a romantic idea, without a doubt. It is a powerful image that sparks our deepest imagination. It makes us think about our past in a profoundly personal and vivid way, to be able to gaze into the eyes of an ancestor from hundreds of thousands of years ago, to see the texture of their skin, the color of their hair, to examine their ancient tools, or even touch their clothes. That would establish a tangible connection to our deep past in a way that no fossilized bone, however significant, ever could. It would make that distant, abstract history incredibly real and immediately tangible, bringing it into our present. But reality, as it so often is typically far less dramatic and far more nuanced than our hopes and imaginations. The daily work of paleontology and paleoanthropology is usually a relentless grind. It involves careful, painstaking excavation, often in remote and challenging environments. It is about finding a tiny tooth and spending years meticulously analyzing it. It is about sifting through tons of earth for a single precious bone fragment. It is about patiently building a comprehensive picture of our past, piece by piece, over decades and centuries of dedicated research. And that work, while perhaps less flashy or cinematic, is what has genuinely revealed the intricate and astounding story of our evolutionary journey. It's honest work. It's real work. It is the foundation of our understanding. So, should we continue to search for such a frozen ancestor? Absolutely. The unknown remains vast. We are still regularly discovering new hominin species, even in the 21st century. We are still finding new archaeological and fossil sites, unearthing new bones, and discovering new types of tools. The Earth still holds many, many secrets, and as scientific technology continues to advance rapidly, our ability to find and meticulously analyze these ancient secrets also grows exponentially. Perhaps new ground-penetrating radar technologies or highly advanced methods of exploring beneath vast ice sheets could one day reveal something truly unexpected. It is healthy to dream, to imagine the seemingly impossible, because sometimes those very dreams push the boundaries of our knowledge and lead us to entirely new discoveries we never even thought possible. But for now, it is equally important to appreciate and celebrate the incredible discoveries we do have. The fossil record, though inherently incomplete and fragmentary, tells an astonishing and complex story. It shows us in broad strokes how our ancestors evolved, how they adapted to dramatically changing environments, and how they eventually spread across the globe. It illustrates our deep and undeniable connection to all life on Earth, and that story, painstakingly told through countless fragments of bone, teeth, and stone tools, is just as powerful, perhaps even more so, because it is the story we have collectively pieced together, one tiny, vital, hard-won piece at a time. The ice might guard its most profound secrets fiercely, but the Earth itself continues to yield countless clues, slowly but surely, to the incredible and ongoing story of us. The hope for a frozen ancestor remains, albeit a very distant and unlikely one. It serves as a potent reminder of the vast mysteries that are still hidden within our planet, and of the enduring human desire to uncover them, no matter how remote the chances of success. It is a deeply compelling thought, a thought that keeps the adventurous spirit of scientific exploration alive, even in the coldest, most desolate, and remote corners of the world. It makes us perpetually wonder what else might be out there, patiently waiting to be found, frozen in time, holding untold secrets. It is an amazing goal. Even if it is a long shot, it keeps dedicated people searching, pushing the boundaries of what we know and how we explore. And sometimes, those ambitious searches lead to other incredibly significant discoveries, even if the primary, almost impossible goal is not directly met. So, the search continues, driven by insatiable curiosity and the profound power of the human imagination. And that in itself is a truly good thing. The Earth is still full of surprises. We just have to keep looking, keep exploring, and keep learning from absolutely everything we find, whether it's frozen solid, fossilized, or simply a faint trace in the ancient soil. The stories held within the permafrost, within the ancient ice sheets, are slowly but steadily being revealed as our understanding grows and as the climate changes. These are stories of entire ecosystems that are long gone, of creatures that walked the earth when the world was a dramatically different place. And perhaps, just perhaps, one day, one of those emerging stories will indeed be about a human relative, caught in an icy embrace, perfectly preserved, waiting for us to finally hear their ancient tale. But the plain reality is that such a find would be a true miracle, a lottery win of the highest possible order in the vast, almost incomprehensible sweep of geological time. It is far more likely that we will continue to deepen our understanding of our ancestors through the bones, the tools, and the subtle traces they left behind, the silent but eloquent witnesses of our deep past. And that in itself is an incredible journey of discovery. We learn more and more every single year. New scientific techniques, constantly evolving, allow us to extract viable DNA from older and older bones, pushing the limits of what was once thought possible. We can now analyze ancient proteins, which are often more stable than DNA, even from very old fossil remains. The technology and methodologies for extracting and interpreting information from ancient biological material are improving constantly. So, even if a full soft tissue body is never found, our ability to glean invaluable information from the remains we do have is always getting better. This means we are always getting closer to a more complete understanding of our ancestors, even without that perfect, elusive frozen specimen. The dream of a frozen ancestor is, at its heart, a powerful symbol of our deep human longing to reach back across the ages and touch the past, to make a direct connection. It's a very human thing to want to see a face, to connect with a person, however ancient they may be. And while that particular direct connection might largely remain within the realm of our dreams and imagination, the wider scientific quest to understand our origins, to map out our evolutionary journey, is intensely real, incredibly active, and constantly revealing new and profound wonders. The ice might indeed keep its deepest and most spectacular secrets, but the earth beneath it and the diligent work of scientists keeps giving us crucial clues, one by one, slowly but surely, to the truly incredible and ongoing story of us. It's a journey of discovery that's never truly finished, and that, more than anything, is what makes it so exciting and so profoundly important.